I need to say something that's going to sound insane. In 2025, Real Madrid did something no football club in history has ever done. They crossed 1 billion euros in revenue, twice, back to back. Nobody else has ever done that once. And for years, I thought I understood how. Ticket sales, shirt sales, Champions League trophies, the usual story. I was wrong, because the real money isn't coming from football anymore. It's coming from concerts, from NFL games, from something a lot closer to Wall Street than to the Bernabeu pitch. Somewhere in the last 25 years, Real Madrid quietly turned into something else. Not just a football club, a financial empire wearing a badge. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand something most Madridistas don't even know is happening right now, this summer. A club that's been owned by its own fans for over 120 years is preparing to sell a piece of itself, for the first time ever. I'm going to show you the money trail, step by step, deal by deal, and I'm going to show you the one investment firm that's already sitting inside not one, but two of Spain's biggest clubs, quietly. Stick with me till the end, because this isn't a good news story. This is an investigation. Let's start with the number that broke football. Real Madrid just posted 1.1 billion euros in revenue in one single year. Official financial rankings confirmed it. Third year running, Madrid is the highest earning football club on planet Earth. And here's the part that should really stop you. Nobody else has ever hit €1 billion twice. Not once, twice. Back to back. Let's put some names next to that number, because numbers alone don't mean anything. Barcelona made close to 975 million. Still a monster number, still not close. Bayern Munich, the most dominant machine in Germany, made 861 million. PSG, backed by one of the richest states on earth, still came in behind Madrid. Now sit with that for a second, because it doesn't make sense on paper. Manchester City is backed by a nation state. PSG is backed by a nation state. Newcastle, same story. These clubs don't need to earn money the hard way. Their owners can quite literally write the check themselves. And there's a real cost to living that way. One people forget about when they're jealous of another club's spending power. Manchester City has spent years fighting off accusations and charges over how their finances actually work behind the scenes. PSG has finally started winning the Champions League too, back to back now. Nobody can take that away from them. But even now, with the trophies finally arriving, PSG's entire financial model still runs on one thing Real Madrid doesn't have and doesn't need. A state willing to absorb the losses, year after year, no matter what happens on the pitch. State money buys you players. Eventually, it can even buy you trophies. What it doesn't automatically buy you is a sustainable business, or the kind of global brand loyalty that outlives any single owner, any single regime, any single decade. Real Madrid has no oil money, no sovereign wealth fund quietly covering the losses, no single billionaire signing off on transfers. On paper, Real Madrid should be losing this fight every single year. Instead, they're lapping the field, out-earning clubs whose entire business model is unlimited outside cash. So the real question isn't how much did they make? Anyone can read a headline number. The real question is, how does a club with no billionaire owner out-earn clubs that print money from oil? That question has an answer, and it's not what you think. It's not the trophies. Madrid didn't win the Champions League every year this decade. Some seasons, they didn't win anything. It's not Vinicius, it's not Bellingham, it's not Mbappe. Individually brilliant players, sure, but players come and go. Revenue like this doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen because of 11 men on a pitch. It's a strategy, one that started 25 years ago with one man and one decision that looked reckless at the time. And most fans watching this right now are still living inside that strategy without ever realizing it's happening to them. Now, quick gut check before we go further, because the numbers only get stranger from here. Matchday income, tickets, hospitality, all of it combined actually dropped 6% for Madrid last year. You'd think that's bad news. It isn't. Even after that drop, Madrid's matchday revenue is still the second highest ever recorded by any club in the history of the sport. Read that again. Their worst matchday year in recent memory still ranks second all time, globally. So if ticket money actually fell, and Madrid still broke the €1 billion mark for the second year running, where did the growth actually come from? Not the pitch, not the turnstiles. Commercial revenue, sponsorships, merchandise, brand deals jumped 23% in the same period. While fans in the stadium were spending less, the machine around the stadium was making more than ever. That's not a football club having a good season. That's a business quietly shifting its entire center of gravity. And once you understand that shift, the next minutes of this video are going to make a lot more sense. We wind to the year 2000. Florentino Perez becomes president, and he makes a promise that sounds insane at the time. Every single year, he says, we buy the best player alive on the market, no exceptions. Figo, ripped straight out of Barcelona for a world record fee. Zidane, Ronaldo, Beckham. Football fans thought it was ego, a rich man's toy box, a president buying trophies for his mantelpiece. It wasn't. It was a business plan wearing a football kit. Here's what nobody said out loud back then, because nobody was thinking that far ahead. Perez didn't see Beckham as a footballer. He saw him as a key that unlocked an entire market. England, Asia, 100 million new eyeballs that had never cared about Real Madrid before that day. Every single Galactico he signed came with with a built-in audience. Attached for free, no marketing budget required. Zidane brought France. Ronaldo brought Brazil, a country of over 200 million football-obsessed fans. Beckham brought the English-speaking world and half of Asia on his back in one signing. To Perez, these weren't just players. They were human billboards, built to capture global attention and turn it into global money. And it worked. It worked so well, it's still working today, decades later, with a different generation of stars. Jersey sales exploded. Sponsors lined up outside the door. Pre-season tours through Asia and America stopped being goodwill trips and started being revenue tours. Madrid stopped being a football club that a few million Spaniards cared about. It became the football club in every country, on every continent, in every time zone. That's not passion for the game. That's not an accident. That doesn't happen by luck. That happens because one man figured out before almost anyone else in world sport that talent isn't just talent. Talent is reach. Talent is distribution. Talent used correctly is a weapon. And once Perez understood that, he quietly stopped building a football team. He started building a media company, one that just happens to play matches on Sundays. Today, that machine is worth more than most people can properly comprehend. Real Madrid's brand is valued at close to $7.7 billion. Some estimates put the club's total enterprise value closer to $6.75 billion. Either number puts them at the top, the most valuable football club on the entire planet. Not necessarily the best team that season, not necessarily the one with the most trophies in the cabinet that year, the most valuable. There's a difference. And once you see that difference, you can't unsee it for the rest of this video, because everything that happens next only makes sense once you understand this one idea. Real Madrid was never really selling football. They were selling something bigger. They were selling belonging, selling identity, selling a small piece of something global that you could wear on your chest. And once you've built a machine that powerful, there's only one place left to expand it. Not the pitch, the building around it. But before we get to the building, you need to see how far Florentino took this idea. Because he didn't stop after the first wave of Galacticos. He left the presidency for a few years. Madrid actually struggled without him, on the pitch and off it. Then he came back in 2009 and did the exact same play again at an even bigger scale. Kaká, Cristiano Ronaldo, for a fee that shattered every transfer record that existed at the time. Then later, Gareth Bale. Same logic, different decade. Ronaldo alone didn't just bring Portugal's fanbase with him. He brought his own personal following, built on social media, bigger than most national federations could ever dream of. By the time Ronaldo left Madrid 9 years later, the club's shirt sales, sponsorship value, and global following had grown faster than almost any other brand in world sport, not just football. That's not a coincidence, and it's not just talent doing that on its own. That's a repeatable formula. Find the player with the biggest built-in audience. Pay whatever it costs. Let the audience pay you back for the next decade. Florentino has now run this play twice, across two entirely different eras, with two entirely different generations of superstars. And once you've proven a formula works twice, at this scale, you stop thinking like a football president. You start thinking like an investor looking for the next asset class to expand into. For Florentino, that next asset class wasn't a player, it was the building the players play in. Let's talk about the Bernabeu, because this is where it gets dark. Madrid didn't just renovate a stadium, they rebuilt a machine and disguised it as a football ground. Total cost, once everything was finally added up, 1.347 billion euros. Let's call it what it is. One of the most expensive buildings in the entire history of sport. A retractable pitch that slides out in giant panels and stores itself underground. A wraparound video screen. A roof that closes over 85,000 seats like something out of a science fiction film. It's genuinely stunning, I'll give them that. But here's the part almost nobody talks about, because it's buried in financial filings, not in highlight reels. Madrid didn't pay for that with ticket money. Nobody could, not even them. So they went to a private investment firm, 6th Street, American money, Texas-based, the kind of firm that usually buys stakes in casinos, airlines, and sports franchises back home. And they didn't just borrow cash from them like a normal loan. They sold something real. They handed over 30% of the stadium's commercial operations for the next 20 years. Read that back slowly. 20 years of concerts, tours, events, every euro of non-matchday income. A third of it doesn't belong to Real Madrid anymore. It belongs to an American investment firm that most fans in that stadium have never even heard of. Think about what that actually means. The most historic stadium in Spanish football, the cathedral, the house that Di Stefano and Puskás built with their feet, decades before any of this. A piece of its future earnings is already sold, signed, sealed, delivered, before most fans even noticed it happened. Why did they need that money so badly when they're already the richest club in the sport? Because in Florentino's mind, the stadium stopped being a stadium the moment renovation started. It became a revenue engine that occasionally hosts football. Concerts were paused for months over noise complaints from the surrounding neighborhood. Once they're fully back on the calendar, and with NFL games already locked in through 2028, that single building is projected to pull in somewhere between 5 and 600 million euros every year. Let that number sit for a second. 5 to 600 million euros from one building before a single ball is even kicked on a Saturday. For comparison, that's more than most mid-table Premier League clubs make in total revenue across an entire season from one building alone. And it wasn't cheap to get here. For years during construction, Madrid played home matches in a stadium that was half finished, cranes in the background, capacity reduced, atmosphere disrupted. Fans complained constantly. Some called it embarrassing for a club this size. Perez didn't blink, because he wasn't building for that season or the next one. He was building for the next 50 years of revenue. Compare the price tag to other so-called super stadiums going up around the world right now, and Madrid's number still stands near the very top of the list, ahead of almost every other purpose-built arena in global sport. That's the scale we're talking about. Not a stadium upgrade, a generational infrastructure bet. Real Madrid isn't primarily in the business of winning La Liga titles anymore. Winning still matters, don't get me wrong, but it's not the engine. They're in the business of owning the single most valuable piece of real estate in European sport and renting it out to touring artists, to the NFL, and to tourists who've never watched a single match in their lives. Football just happens to be the tenant. A very famous, very profitable tenant, but a tenant all the same. And once you see the stadium that way, the sponsorship numbers start to make a very different kind of sense. Here's the thing about running a business this size. You never want just one income stream. If Real Madrid only made money from football, one bad season could actually hurt them. A trophyless year, a player injury crisis, a bad transfer window. So Florentino didn't stop at the stadium. He kept building outward in every direction he could find. A streaming and media arm, producing content around the club, 24 hours a day, feeding the same global audience the Galacticos strategy created decades earlier. A women's team, growing fast, opening up an entirely new sponsorship category that didn't even exist for Madrid 10 years ago. Academy operations and training facilities that function less like a football school and more like a small campus, generating their own commercial activity. None of these individually move the billion-euro number by much, but stacked together, they do something more important. They insulate the empire. If one stream slows down, 5 others keep the machine running. That's not how football clubs used to operate. That's how holding companies operate. Here's where the empire gets bigger and colder. Adidas just signed on for 8 more years. Over $1 billion. One deal with one club for one badge on one shirt. Emirates renewed too, roughly 100 million euros. Every single year. The biggest sponsorship number in the history of European football, on its own. Add in the sleeve sponsor, HP, quietly paying around 80 million a year for a logo the size of a stamp, and Madrid pulls roughly 300 million euros annually from free logos stitched onto a shirt. 300 million euros from fabric. No other club on earth touches that number. Not Barcelona, not Manchester United, even with their massive global following. Nobody. And that's before you even count merchandise sitting on shelves. Jerseys, training kits, scarves, the endless stream of product drops timed around every big signing. Every pre-season tour through the US or Asia isn't really a tour anymore, not in the traditional sense. It's a retail activation, dressed up as football. Stadiums sell out in cities where the local team has never won anything. Fans who've never set foot in Madrid show up just to see the badge in person and to buy something on the way out. That entire pipeline, tours, merchandise, local partnerships, traces back to the exact same idea Perez planted 25 years ago. Bring the biggest names and the world follows them home. And here's the part that should make you a little uncomfortable if you really sit with it. None of this is really about football. It never fully was. Adidas isn't paying 300 million a year for goals. Emirates isn't paying that money for trophies in a cabinet. They're paying for reach, for the eyeballs Perez built 25 years ago, with a strategy that looked like ego at the time and turned out to be genius. Every superstar Madrid signs now isn't just there to win matches. They're there to keep the machine fed. Bellingham isn't just a midfielder, he's a walking sponsorship renewal. Mbappe isn't just a striker, he's a jersey sales report waiting to happen in every country he's ever set foot in. This is the part fans don't like to say out loud, because it takes some of the romance out of the game. But it's true. It's been true for 2 decades, quietly running underneath every transfer headline you've ever read. Football is the show, money is the plot underneath it. And the biggest twist in that plot hasn't even happened yet. It's happening right now, this summer, while most fans are looking the other way. Here's what almost nobody watching this video knows. Real Madrid isn't owned by a billionaire. It never has been. Not once in over a century of existence. Since 1902, it's been owned by its own fans. Around 100,000 ordinary members called socios. They vote for the president. They vote on major decisions. No dividends, no profit extraction. Every single euro gets reinvested back into the club by law. It's the last real fortress of fan ownership left at the very top of football. Maybe the last one that will ever exist at this scale. While Manchester City sold to Abu Dhabi, while PSG sold to Qatar, while Newcastle sold to Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, Real Madrid stayed the one super club that still belonged to its own people. Not a royal family, not a hedge fund. The fans. That's the story Madridistas have been proud of for over a century. It's part of the identity. It's why this club calls itself different. Here's the part that should stop you cold. Right now, quietly, Florentino Perez is preparing to sell a piece of that club to outside investors. For the first time in 123 years of history. 5% to start, maybe 10 further down the line. The names being floated include Saudi state money and the very same American investment firm that already owns a slice of the Bernabeu. And here's a detail that should really unsettle you if you're a Madridista. That firm, 6th Street, isn't just parked inside Real Madrid Stadium. They already own 25% of Barcelona's television money. For the next 25 years, 667 million euros, handed over in 2 separate deals so Barcelona could keep the lights on and register new signings. Read that again. The same investment firm now has a financial foothold inside both Real Madrid and Barcelona, Spain's 2 fiercest rivals, quietly connected by the same American money on the same balance sheet logic. Florentino calls his version a strategic ally. He says the investor will never be an owner. Listen to that phrasing carefully because it matters. That's exactly the kind of sentence powerful men use right before something changes forever. To be fair, it still needs a vote. The socios have to formally approve it in an extraordinary assembly before a single euro changes hands. Now, if you don't follow how these votes usually go, let me give you some context because it matters here. Across more than 2 decades running this club, Florentino has built a reputation for rarely losing a major vote of his members. He calls the assembly, he presents the numbers, he frames the deal as necessary, as protective, as the only way to keep competing with state-backed rivals. And the socios, understandably, usually side with whatever keeps the club winning. That's what they're there for, that's what they show up for. So when people say it still needs a vote, so it's not decided yet, I push back on that a little. A vote isn't automatically the same thing as real resistance, especially when the person calling it has this much control over the room and the message. I'm not saying it's rigged, I'm saying by the time it reaches a vote, the outcome usually isn't much of a surprise. But ask yourself something honestly. If Real Madrid already sold 1/3 of its stadium operations, and most fans barely blinked, if Barcelona already sold 1/4 of their TV rights for the next 25 years, just to stay afloat, do you really believe a 5% equity vote is where any of this stops? Or is that just the next quiet step in a plan that's been running for 25 years, since long before most of today's fans were even born? Since the day a construction magnate decided footballers weren't just athletes, they were assets. Distribution channels wearing boots. This is the same man who once said the Galacticos were never about ego, they were about growth. Now, at 79 years old, he's applying that exact same logic. Not to players anymore, to the club itself.
And here's the question I can't stop thinking about. The one I want you to sit with too. Every single deal we've walked through today started small. A 30% slice of stadium operations, a minority stake in Barcelona's TV rights. Symbolic, everyone said at the time. Symbolic deals have a strange habit of not staying symbolic for very long, once the money starts flowing and the precedent gets set. If 5% gets approved this year, what does 10% look like in 5 years? What does 20% look like in 15? Nobody's saying Real Madrid gets sold outright tomorrow. That's not the claim here, and I want to be careful not to overstate it. The claim is simpler, and honestly, more unsettling. The wall between fan-owned club and investor-backed enterprise is thinner right now than it's ever been in over a century of this club's existence. And it's getting thinner every single year, one quiet deal at a time. So let's go back to where we started. Real Madrid made over €1 billion, twice, a number no club in history has ever touched. But that number was never really about football, not the way we grew up thinking about it. It came from a stadium that isn't even fully theirs anymore. 1/3 of it already belongs to a firm in Texas. It came from sponsors buying global reach, not buying trophies. And soon, maybe, it will come from outside investors buying a piece of a club that swore, for over 100 years, it would never be for sale. Real Madrid didn't stop being a football club. I want to be fair here because they're still the most successful club of this century on the pitch too. But underneath that, they became something bigger, something colder. A financial empire that happens to play its home games in white. And most fans sitting in that stadium on a Saturday night have no idea they're actually sitting inside a boardroom. I want to be honest with you about something, because that's the whole point of this channel. None of what I've shown you today is illegal. None of it is even secretive technically. Every deal I mentioned is filed somewhere, reported somewhere, voted on somewhere. The uncomfortable part isn't that Real Madrid did any of this. Almost every super club in world football is doing some version of the same thing right now. The uncomfortable part is how few fans actually know it's happening, while they're busy arguing about a 9.5 rating on a striker's performance. You can love this club and still ask hard questions about who's really going to own it in 10 years. Those two things aren't in conflict. In fact, I'd argue the second one is exactly what a real fan should be doing. If this opens your eyes even a little, you need to see what's happening at Barcelona right now, with the same investment firm already inside their walls. Because Barcelona's version of this story isn't genius,
It's a warning about what happens when the money runs out faster than the ambition. If you want the real money behind the badge, every week, subscribe. We're pulling back the curtain on the business nobody bothers to explain to fans. I'll see you in the next one.